Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to part 3 of my end of season waffle series, a series where I give a few of my thoughts on how each team and driver got on in 2023, and as I'm sure you know by now, go over a few stats as well. I've already covered Haas to Alpine, so today I'm talking about Aston Martin and McLaren, two teams who had almost sort of opposite seasons. Opposite is possibly the wrong word, but they certainly switched places near the halfway point. I will carry on in reverse championship order, so we'll start with Aston Martin today, and what a surprise they were at the start of the year. Now, I know they had a good pre-season and everyone seemed to be really optimistic about the car and their chances of some good results early on, but I did not expect to see them make the leap forward they did. Let's look at it this way. Aston Martin finished 7th in the Constructors' Championship in 2022 and scored just 55 points, but they ended 2023 in P5 and picked up 280 points and 8 podium finishes. What a step forward that is. I would say that much of the first half of the year was positive for them, and you could argue had they been bolder with strategy in Monaco, they might have snatched a win too. That is all ifs and buts, of course, and we'll never know for sure. But that great start to the year, which, by the way, saw Fernando Alonso finish on the podium at 6 of the opening 8 races, tailed off more than a little as the season went on. I mean, post-summer break, they only managed 2 podiums. That's quite the difference. The key there was, if you want me to make it sound really dramatic, is that they lost the development war. So much so that they were passed by Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren to go from arguably the second best team to the 5th best team. And it wasn't really until they basically abandoned the upgrades late on that they found some better form. I don't think it's controversial to say that they need to be spending plenty of time, and I'm sure they will, working out how and why they got things so badly wrong when it came to the upgrades, because next year the development war will be even more intense and they can't afford to fall back any further, with every team likely to make a step forward next season. As for the drivers, Fernando Alonso was superb pretty much all season. As already mentioned, he picked up 6 podiums for the opening 8 races and was the only one remotely close to challenging Red Bull in the early stages. He managed another 2 podiums in the second half of the season and scored points at all but one race he finished. He carried Aston Martin in 2023 and even managed to snatch a well-earned 4th place in the championship at the final race in Abu Dhabi. The only thing I'm kind of disappointed about is that he wasn't able to win a race. As already mentioned, there was a shot in Monaco, but it just seemed almost a no-brainer to expect to win at some stage in the first half of the season because he was just so competitive. That's not a criticism, by the way, as I'm sure you're well aware by now. Beating Verstappen and Red Bull to victory was near impossible. It only happened once. So, no, not a criticism of Alonso at all. It's just a shame because I'd have loved to have seen him back on the top step just the once. It was fantastic to see him on form though, but I can't say I was surprised. Surprised Aston took the step they did, but not even remotely surprised that Alonso managed to deliver the season he did in that car. I've got to say, it was great to see him up there on the podium consistently early on, and I do wonder where he might have ended up if the team had got the development right. Could he have ended up P2 in the standings come the end of the year, for example? Let me know what you think about that. And it is worth mentioning as well that he said this year goes alongside 2012 as one of his best, and I can totally see why. Even when the car wasn't where he wanted it to be, Alonso still dragged it around some really solid results. He's still got it, hasn't he? His stats and averages for the year are just as impressive as I expected they would be, with an average qualifying position of P7, average race finish of 5.6, and even managed to pick up an average of 9 points per race for a total of 206 points, and he picked up all of the team's 8 podiums. Can't forget those. He also comfortably won the teammate head-to-heads, but with all due respect to Lance Stroll, that's not really a massive surprise. On the subject of his teammate, Lance Stroll had a disappointing season by comparison. He actually did start the year solidly despite racing whilst injured, finishing in the points in 3 of the opening 4 races, with that mechanical retirement in Jeddah potentially the only thing stopping him making it 4 out of 4 and finished P4 as well in the race in Australia. Lots of 4s there. Yes, his teammate was much stronger, but that teammate is Fernando Alonso, so that's not a great surprise. I don't think anyone expects Stroll to be anywhere near Alonso's level, and so consistent point scoring in that car was the minimum goal, and he did that for much of the first part of the season to his credit. But immediately after the summer break, he failed to make the top 10 5 times in a row, including his DNS in Singapore following his big qualifying crash. His end to the year wasn't bad though, as he managed 4 points finishes from the final 5 races and finished 5th in Brazil and Las Vegas with excellent drives. The trouble is he lacks consistency, and I still believe, as I've said many times since I started this channel in 2017, his Saturdays cost him big time. It's sort of an obvious statement, but if you start well down the field, it's going to be tough to challenge for a top end points finish, and you're more likely to get caught up in mid-pack incidents. I'm not saying that had he qualified better, he'd have won 10 races this season or anything quite as bonkers as that, but he'd surely have more points on the board and maybe even a podium. It has to be said, though, his lack of consistency and speed at times arguably cost Aston P4 in the standings. Okay, McLaren, as I'll talk about shortly, did take some huge steps this season, but with Aston only 22 points off them come the end of the year, there was a real chance that had Stroll been better and again more consistent when it came to point scoring, it could have helped earn the team the few $1 million more that come with finishing a place higher in the standings. Yeah, it's all shoulda, woulda, coulda, of course, but he needs to step it up because with other teams improving and the pack likely to be closer, Aston might not be able to afford to just rely on one driver saving them, even if that one driver is Fernando Alonso. Just something to think about. Before I get on to McLaren, let's have a quick run through Stroll's averages for this season. His average qualifying comes in at 12.45, further highlighting what I said earlier about his Saturdays. His average race finish was 8.88, which is actually better than I expected it to be, honestly. And he managed to pick up an average of just over 3 points per race and finish the season with a total of 74 and a 10th place finish. What about McLaren then? Well, before the season even started, Zak Brown and co warned that they had missed their development targets with the car and they were not where they had hoped to be. That was evident in testing and in the opening rounds of the season. They said they struggled and they did, especially in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia where they failed to score a single point and had a best finish of P15. It was around that point that I remember saying on a live stream that maybe this would end up being a bit of a transitional year for McLaren and perhaps more focus will be put on 2024, especially with the new wind tunnel coming online in the summer. However, that wasn't the case at all, and the good news was that they knew what the issues were and they were committed to resolving them, and oh wow did they resolve them. From Bahrain to Canada, the opening 8 races of the season, McLaren scored a mere 17 points, sat 6th in the standings and were 137 points behind Aston Martin, who at that stage were 3rd in the constructors' standings. Thankfully for the team, the upgrades and fixes started arriving from Austria, and following the race in Suzuka, that's 8 races after Canada, they were on a total of 172 points. So that's 17 points in the opening 8 races and a whopping 155 in the next 8. And come the end of the season, they ended up in 4th place in the standings with 302 points, 22 more than Aston Martin. That is an insane turnaround. Sure, if we're comparing their season with Aston, the Silverstone team did have their issues I've already gone over, but still, take nothing away from McLaren because what they achieved in largely the second half of the season was absolutely brilliant. Hopefully, fingers crossed and all that, they can continue making those steps forward and be challengers at the front again in 2024. Lando Norris was also excellent this season, that's even before the big updates arrived. Despite the struggles with the car, he still managed to pick up 12 points before Austria and deliver some decent performances. Sure, there were a lot of struggles and disappointing results, but all things considered, it could have been much worse. As soon as the updates arrived, though, he absolutely delivered. He scored at all but 1 race from Austria to Abu Dhabi, including 7 podiums and a total of 10 top 5 finishes, to jump from 12 points to 205 points. That is remarkable when you look at it like that. Huge credit absolutely goes to the team, as I've already said, but the driver still needs to get the most out of the car and deliver the results, and Norris did that, so he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. It wasn't all great though, as Norris has stated himself quite a few times. Whilst his Sunday's post-update were mostly excellent, he sometimes left a bit on the table in qualifying, making mistakes at some weekends that arguably cost him a chance of pole position. I mean, look at Abu Dhabi as just one example, the most recent example. He was on a storming lap and was challenging for pole, but had that big sideways moment under the hotel, and that cost him a chance of P1. And that happened a few times over the course of the year and was probably the biggest negative of the season for him. I don't really know what else to say, honestly. He had a fantastic year overall and, as already mentioned, delivered some excellent results for the team. He also won the teammate battles and his numbers for the year are really good as well. His average qualifying position was 8.13 with an average race finish of 7.42, and he averaged 8.36 points per race and finished the season in P6. I will say, though, I know we're talking about the whole season, so maybe this is a bit unfair on other drivers and teams, but I'm going to do it anyway. Those early struggles really do pull those averages down, but if I take quali and race averages from Austria onwards, when the updates started to arrive, they are much better at 6.64 and 3.92 respectively. That further highlights the season of kind of two halves that McLaren had. And last, but by no means least for this video, is Oscar Piastri, and what a rookie season he has had. A lot of people have talked about his talent, his speed and his potential over the last few years, and especially since all that contract drama last year, but I'm not convinced many expected him to be up to speed quite as quickly as he was, certainly when you consider he hadn't raced competitively at all in 2022, a fantastic performance. I will throw this in here for the sake of balance. Someone mentioned in our end of season live stream that he was over 100 points behind Lando Norris. And whilst that is absolutely factually correct and he was well beaten by his teammate in the head-to-heads, it was his rookie season. He was up against a driver that many will argue is a generational talent and potential future world champion. So my counter to that is that everything he achieved in 2023 is in many ways even more impressive to me. Sometimes the points gap between teammates tells the full story, sometimes it doesn't. And I think Piastri's year falls under the latter. But anyway, like I say, I thought I'd throw that in there for balance, even though I'm not letting that take away from his season at all. Here comes the stat you're probably all sick of hearing by now, but he is the first driver since Lewis Hamilton in 2007 to finish on the podium more than once in their rookie campaign. Impressive stuff. He scored 97 points, grabbed 2 fastest lap, and he won the sprint in Qatar. All in all, brilliant from the Aussie, and I'm so happy that he hit the ground running this year. I really am. Pushing the stats aside for a minute, what really impressed me with him this year was his ability and confidence to go wheel to wheel with anyone. It would be so easy for him to shy away a little bit as a rookie and not take too many big risks, but he wasn't afraid to race hard against his teammates and the biggest names in the sport. I'm not personally surprised by that, by the way, because he really is a talent and has demonstrated that throughout his career, but it was still great to see him do it. Let's quickly run through his stats and averages for 2023. Then his average qualifying and race positions were 9.86 and 9.63 respectively. And to be fair, if we do what we did for Norris and go from Austria, they come in at 8.21 and 8. Overall, he averaged 3.72 points per race and ended the year in 9th in the Drivers' Championship with that total I already mentioned of 97 points. I was so impressed with Piastri this year, and I'm excited to see how he gets on in 2024. And to be fair, how both of the McLaren drivers continue to grow. That team has got one heck of a lineup there that is loaded with potential. And as we've seen this year, give them a car capable of big results and they will both deliver big results. The future could well be very bright for McLaren. That is it for this end of season waffle then, but you can let me know how you think Aston McLaren and their drivers did in 2023 in the comments section down below. Now, I will be back next Thursday at 4 PM GMT with the penultimate video in the series, that one being about Ferrari and Mercedes, of course. In the meantime, though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like, as it really does help the channel in its never-ending fight with the YouTube algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe so don't miss out on any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.